Yeah,
Hi.
audio came back fine now. Hi,
Hi.
Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm starting to be nervous.
Don't be nervous. It's such a great group.
I know, but I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. So if everyone's all settled, let's get started. First of all, thank you everyone for joining my talk, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Kathy, and I'll be talking about my experience, my whole journey as a chief technology officer at a seed stage startup. Okay, so because the company that I founded it's a bit smaller than the companies that other people work for at this conference, I'll give a little background on why I'm giving this talk, why I feel like what we've accomplished as an all-female team is super important. So Queenly started as an iOS web and Android app released around 2019. iOS first, later web and Android later that year. And then we were able to achieve many milestones in the tech industry. First being accepted by Y Combinator earlier this year in their winter 2021 batch. We did their demo day, and from demo day, we raised a $6.3 million seed round led by Andreessen Horowitz, many wonderful angel investors, and many wonderful firms. A quick update on the numbers just quoted is we're almost at 200,000 App Store downloads and 120,000 monthly active users. And as you know, our platform is a platform for wedding dresses, prom dresses, all kinds of special occasion dresses, and we have over 70,000 dresses listed. And this was definitely such a journey, such a difficult, challenging time to grow a company, especially during the pandemic, as well as it's my first company. It was my co-founder's first company. And so from the very beginning, from my own experience, like I always had that imposter syndrome on whether I could call myself a CTO, whether I had the skill set, whether I had the experience, the qualifications. But my background is that I'm a computer science grad from the University of Pennsylvania. And right after graduation, I joined Pinterest. I was a full stack engineer there, was working on the web stack, the iOS stack, trying as hard as possible to learn and grow for those few years. And I think that really helped me build my expertise, build the foundation for being able to kick off and start Queenly. What we're super proud of, myself, and here's a picture of myself and my co-founder, Trisha. We're an all-female founding team. So not just the two of us as female minority founders, but pretty much all our early full-time founding team that we've hired this year. We're a team of 8 now, and we've hired many wonderful women from Poshmark, from small startups, from a range of different backgrounds, and have gotten this far, gotten so much traction because of that. Another thing that I think is pretty unique is we're a tech startup, but our whole engineering team is so far all women. And I've been super proud of Juliet and Dee, and all the growth, all the accomplishments we've had so far are due to them and due to our entire team, all the work and effort. And yeah, that's why I want to be here. That's why I feel like what we've accomplished, what the technical journey that Queenly has gone through is really worth showcasing. And I hope that hearing about this will help everyone too. Okay, so let's start back in 2019. This was back when I was still a full-time engineer at Pinterest. We were thinking about launching Queenly as a minimal viable product. And the thing about what people call an MVP, and when people talk about just kicking off your product, there is a lot of anxiety around that. And looking back on it retrospectively, I feel that the best advice is to just do it and to not get hung up on the fact of thinking about having a big launch, thinking about having like a super polished end-to-end user design. I took 2 screenshots here. The screenshot on the left where you see a big blocky header that says current dress searches. That's pretty much all the dresses that were listed on our app when we launched out of beta. And so this search bar that you see on the left that was barely working, it wasn't actually a full text search. It was, you basically just select a bunch of filters and you get like a handful of dress results. Everything that we built here was a very bare bones design and also had a lot of crashes. So fast forward to 2021 on the right, this is what our app looks like right now. And as you can see, we have way more search results. The design, the polish is there. Going from A to B, going from that very beginning to here was such a journey. And we still have so much more to do in terms of building that beautiful UX, building that really optimal shopping consumer experience on our product. So my advice when it comes to launching, oh, one other thing, the whole story of when we first submitted this first app to the Apple App Store is that we ran into all these issues with getting approved to the App Store. And they're super strict about it when you're a first-time developer. And so getting that first approval, getting that timeline is always going to be a huge hurdle. So my advice is to not get hung up on that, because you'll always have this process of getting feedback from your customers, from your users, iterating on your design, and it will not look at all like what you saw on day 0 of your product. Okay, so a lot of my talk is trying to encapsulate as much general advice, tell you about as much of a story as possible. One of my biggest pieces of advice is to start with out-of-the-box tools. So when building the MVP, everything was on Firebase. And for those of you that don't know, Firebase is a very very out-of-the-box tool for having things like basic database setup. It's a NoSQL data store, and it's pretty much that you don't have to set up a whole server, you don't have to set up a whole API to create like a cloud data store, which is fantastic. For myself, I lean a little more front end than back end in terms of my own engineering experience. So I was able to just launch a bunch of the core features, listing a dress for sale, doing a checkout flow, doing all those pretty foundational things without having to set up a whole bunch of servers, a whole bunch of database read-write systems. They also do like so many other things like crash reporting analytics. And I'd say like even throughout the journey, even to this day, it's really important to try to use as many tools as possible, because when you're a small team, it's hard to get up and set up so much infrastructure. It's hard to have one person dedicated to monitoring. And so it's extremely important to just like take as many of these tools as possible and see what you can just piece together. It's a bit of a Frankenstein project, and that's kind of what a startup tech platform is, but it will help you survive. My other point about this that I forgot to write down, use startup credits. Go and apply to the MongoDB startup program, the Heroku Google Cloud startup program. Make sure that like, because these can cost a few $1,000s a year if you're not careful. But if you're starting a company, you can always apply for these credits, get all your cloud costs for free. And segueing from that, jumping into like thinking about like, okay, what are these quick tools to get my platform, get my app off the ground? Like I mentioned, I started on Firebase, which is NoSQL. It's a base structured non-relational database. And so Firebase is a bit restrictive in compound queries, but it's really similar to Mongo. So we're able to stick to Mongo. And overall, the main decision I wanted to say is that we stuck to a NoSQL non-relational database system. And so this is a big decision that you have to make early on. Why we made this decision is that you have to think about the shape of your data, the speed as which you want to do things like to quick feature launches. And I guess like a quick primer, the whole like SQL versus not SQL, ACID versus base. I think it's important to think about the availability, basically availability and what's it called, consistency, basically consistency versus availability. And what's great about a NoSQL like Mongo is that we can be really flexible with the data. And because we don't need to update it so much, for example, people might buy a couple dresses a day or might list a couple of dresses a day, but we're not like a social media app where people are like constantly doing like chatting, accessing, changing data. It's what's considered a low write, high read frequency of data access. And so this type of schema, this type of data storage solution was great for Queenly. I added a screenshot here of one of our many quick feature launches. Basically this year, overnight, or not overnight, we had a very quickly advancing agreement with the pageant called Miss USA. It's one of the biggest pageant systems in the world. And so we wanted to create a lot of things to promote it. And so one of the things we basically whipped up overnight was Crystal Stewart, the new owner and director of Miss USA and a former title holder herself, plus famous actress, a lot of big stuff. She wanted to feature her closet on Queenly. We had only a few weeks to like know about it, get her closet listings, scramble to list them. And so we wanted to do a bunch of different, we want to structure our closet differently, basically make this whole like data structure of like a fancy celebrity closet. And so that's where MongoDB was a great choice because we can just like very easily adjust our user data store, our user closets data store. And so, yeah, if you ever have a celebrity that suddenly wants to use your app, I think this is probably one of the good technical situations you can think about. Yeah, and inevitably at this stage, you want to think about database migrations. I think at a big company, that sounds like a scary word, basically moving from one data store to another. For us, it was moving from Firebase to MongoDB. I'd say that it's not that scary as long as you do it early. And for us, early meant that we had a manageable enough size and scale of our data that we were able to migrate it completely. If you're in the middle of a migration, if you're doing this for two things, like make sure you're doing this to do things like improve user experience. Make sure like being able to make this decision means that you're like able to ship an optimal user experience to your users as quickly as possible. Make sure to duplicate data. I know that's a little tough to manage, and I know that that is not ideal philosophically because you'll have to like manage data in like two different states, make them consistent. But what I learned as early stage startup CTO is it's better to never lose data. And so that goes, I think that goes into my next piece of advice / hindsight is 2020. Log everything. Similar to like it being a good thing that you can have duplicate data. It's a good thing if you double log, if you overlog everything, like every backend event, front-end event, every action that a user takes. And this is one of my regrets, that we did not log everything from the very beginning. so many of our early users in 2019, early 2020, whenever there was a crash, a weird buggy experience, like we could not remotely figure out, we could not figure out remotely like what actions they took to get to that screen. It's also good because like you get to, if you make sure you have all these records of metrics, it can help lay the foundation for better growth engineering, better analytics of basically like how you're actually building the user experience. So if you forget everything else in this talk, remember to just log everything. One thing I'd really recommend is using Amplitude, because Amplitude was super easy to set up. It was just like installing the SDK and then writing one line of code. And they have a lot of just like out of the box tools. Yeah, another thing that was outside of growing all these skills in all these tech stacks and learning about different areas of engineering, I'd say what was really useful was learning about marketing, learning about analytics when it comes to growing a company. And this is a whole field of data, a whole field of data science, actually, that we were really trying to invest in early on, and we thankfully throughout this year we've gotten to hire wonderful growth marketers from Poshmark, and we've gotten to learn a lot about how to really like break down and how to really grow users as a startup. Because when people talk about startup growth, it's not building like one viral sensation that like magically one day you'll have thousands, hundreds of thousands of users. The way we got from 0 users to our hundreds of thousands of users was through a lot of iteration, a lot of incremental changes. And so a lot of this is based in growth marketing. So if you're an engineer, if you're looking to be a technical leader, it's and even though marketing might have seemed like a fluff word to you way back, or like you might have that stereotype, it's a lot of things that are like super core to engineering, like super core to what engineers can help out with. So educate yourself on all these terms: cost per click, cost per install, how ad displays work, how dynamic ads works. If you're doing any sort of consumer startup that needs to grow through paid ads as well as through SEO, educate yourself. And in the SEO space, it's important to basically learn how it works, because that's a whole industry in its own. And this is also how companies don't get growth for free. It's a lot of strategy. It's a lot of thinking. There's so many terms about this, and I would recommend just like taking classes, getting advice from people who are SEO marketers, and seeing like how like this whole breakdown of how growth works. Because when you're an early stage tech leader, it's good to learn everything that's a bunch of things that aren't directly engineering, because you're not just an engineering leader, you're a startup founder, or you're leading an early stage startup. You're responsible for much more than just like one small component of the business. Yeah, I think my advice also, as someone who's pretty front end heavy and as someone who's trying to touch as many parts of the stack as possible, is similar to my backend stack advice. So our front end stack, we have apps on iOS, Android, and web. We have relied extensively on many out-of-the-box tools, similar to our backend stack. A lot of packages and libraries when it comes to different UI components, different ways of doing like form validation, different ways of doing navigation. And I think the biggest advantage of a company this early is that, not that it's necessarily overly complex or messy, but there's a huge advantage of just like making this like hybrid Frankenstein app. So for background, at Pinterest, I worked extensively in Objective-C. Right now, the most common easy to use languages are Swift and Swift UI. And so right now our app is in this hybrid model where through muscle memory, I built a lot of our Objective-C views and view controllers, but a few of the notification logic, a few smaller views, I started building in Swift, started having like that Swift component of our app. And I think, and also with iOS and web and Android, they share a few web views when it comes to just like informational pages, when it comes to as much shared content that could change a lot very often. This is a huge advantage to a startup that needs to move fast, move quickly, and doesn't have like such a massive legacy code base that you need to like think so much about maintaining. Another topic on this whole thing when you're building consumer app for multiple platforms is, should I build it in React Native? And my answer is, I've worked with React Native before and it's a great tool. And my answer is you should do whatever you have the most muscle memory of. I would say that looking back, I actually did build our apps from the native code bases of Objective-C Swift for iOS, Kotlin for Android, and React for web. And the reason why React Native hadn't been incorporated was because I had the existing experience. I was like super fortunate enough to have that existing experience of being able to rely on the muscle memory of like, okay, this is how I set up the app delegate. This is how I set up the different navigation view controllers on iOS. And then I had like the muscle memory of experience on how to do it on web. Doing it that way also gives you that level of fine-tuned control over building really custom stuff for each of those user experiences. So, but I wouldn't say not to use React Native. I'd say to use whatever tool you feel most comfortable with. And so I did whatever was speediest for us to get our app off the ground. One thing that I feel super strongly about, I think that there's a myth too, like along with the myth of like having a super perfect MVP, there's a myth that you can just like pile on technical debt. And I don't think that's fair to your future engineers. I think that it's important for, if you're a technical startup leader, to set an example as a role model by looking at trade-offs. Basically, you're allowed to write bad code. Like you're allowed to do whatever you want, of course. But it's good to manage those trade-offs, like really know why you're making those decisions, really know why it's important for you to take certain shortcuts. And it's good to just be aware of that. And it's good for yourself to pay down your technical debt. I think it's good first and foremost to set that example to other engineers, just set the culture of just like taking ownership of whatever you build. But it's also good to really, it's also good because yourself is the person that made those speedy decisions, that made those tech debt decisions. And so you yourself, rather than having other engineers clean up that technical debt, like you yourself are the one who can do the best at cleaning it up, at refactoring, modularizing, deprecating certain things. And so I will die on this hill to say that like early startup CTOs should be the ones that take ownership of the tech debt they create. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, but not really, because the engineering team culture, building that team from just yourself, just you and your co-founder, to this extensive, wonderful engineering team culture, that's a super important part of why you're here and why I'd love to give this talk. I think it's important to, I think as a tech leader, it's important to think about the soft skills, to say, the non-technical things, such as being a good communicator and being someone who can speak with empathy, who can understand, communicate, really build that emotional skill aspect of yourself. And so in terms of hiring, in terms of what I was starting to think of, what myself and Trisha were starting to think of when it comes to like building our early team, a lot of it was built on thinking about culture. So having tech interviews that are not just like purely algorithms, purely CS fundamentals, seeing if someone had the drive, the passion to really care about building the largest marketplace for dresses, to really caring about building a really nice user experience. And that person doesn't have to be interested in dresses or fashion or necessarily have that direct experience. But it's something that really signals that like outside of having tech skills, those are things that really bring a team together. Another thing that I like to do in our interviewing loop is to have engineers be interviewed by the non-engineering aspects of our team. So very often, aside from the technical interviews, there's interviews where our ops team, our partners growth team talks to engineers. And I think that's really core in a startup to be able to talk with and show respect to the business side of things. Because when you're a small team and when you're trying to build something like a consumer app, when you're trying to build something that like everyone on the founding team should show like care and passion to, I think having that skill of being able to collaborate with non-engineers on ideas, move projects forwards is extremely crucial. And outside of hiring, what I care about is really based on being thankful for my own positive experiences. I've had really great engineering mentors in the past, and so I want to do my best job to push it forward. A lot of the engineering values, I'm also this is the first time I'm any sort of manager at all, so this is super weird to me. But the first things I care about is that what I mentioned, transparency, communication, and the eagerness to learn and grow. In terms of like reflecting on myself, being able to be a good leader, I think it's more than just being able to make decisions and being able to like more than just a title. I feel that as a early stage technical founder, you do have the responsibility of being sort of a role model, being a mentor to people. And especially if you have something like my team where we're an all female engineering team, there's a certain level of advocacy. There's a certain level of being able to be that advocate, be that supporter for the careers of the members of your team. Here's some quick examples of basically last year, we had a few engineering interns, and they're really great because they both love dresses. They both like were interested in like pattern dresses, like all like fashion and all that. And they were both really interested in data science. So what I made them do is I made them write technical blog posts. And this was also their first internships and first time they had to like write and put out content to the world for the world to consume and say like, hey, look at my engineering projects. But I think giving people that voice, giving people that platform to showcase the work they've accomplished, to really give people that skill set of being able to have something they're proud of after they did their internship at Queenly, after they've worked with you. I think that's a really important thing to pass forward. Okay, so key takeaways. I'll try to summarize everything. I think things in general, when you're building, scaling, launching, launching new features, trying to address customer bugs and fix crashes in the middle of the night. It will always be messy. And I think it's hard to, but it's an exercise in trying to predict the future as much as possible. So what I mentioned with like choosing a database, choosing a schema, you'll have to anticipate things that might happen. And I think that that's really hard to do, but as a startup founder, you'll have to do your best job in log everything, be flexible with your tech stack, think a lot about what suits your product, and do things that are best for your community. And for context, a lot of our community, a lot of our user base are not necessarily the super tech savvy, super elite Silicon Valley people. A lot of the women who buy dresses on our app are just people who have small businesses, people in different parts of America. And so, so when we think about things like, when we think about the speed and performance of our app, when we think about trying to create a really good user experience for them, that's absolutely key. And that level of empathy is key. And the hill that I'll die on is taking ownership of your tech debt. Basically, refactor your own code. And I very strongly believe in that. Okay, I also wanted to say that try to find as many mentors and advisors as possible. I wanted to give a big thanks to our engineering advisors and angel investors of Queenly, Jeremy, Daniel, Jacob, Huayong, and Bishwa. They've been available to help us with different parts of the tech stack. They've really contributed, and I think that it's good to make sure that you can have advisors, you can build the relationship with technical leaders outside of your company as much as possible, because you're a small company, you're going to have limited resources, and you're going to need help. So it's good to know where to ask for help. Thank you all so much for attending my talk. I think that I have the rest of the time to answer questions, but the last thing I want to show on the slide is to, if you're looking for a job, if you're interested in joining us as an engineer, you can email me. Also, if you just want to connect, but we are looking for full stack React Python engineers. We're looking for iOS, Android, mobile engineers. And in general, I love to connect with other women in the industry. I love to see if I can pass my knowledge forward in any way. So yeah, happy to answer questions now.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Such an amazing talk. And before I ask the first question, I would love to selfishly ask my question, which is, have you recently taken a step back and realized how much you have done in the last just 5 years? Because I am blown away with all that you can do and all that you do. It's just incredible. You should be very proud of yourself if you're not already.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I honestly feel that I do feel a great bit of imposter syndrome, because when it comes to feeling proud of accomplishments, it's like, sure, I think it's great. I am proud of our team. I'm proud of everything I was fortunate enough to learn. But I think what's also tricky is that when you start a company, you kind of get into this laser focused tunnel vision mindset of what's next. And
Totally.
So even while I'm thinking about this talk, I'm thinking about oh, we have so many, we have all these partnerships, we have all these big feature launches we want to accomplish. It's hard to, I think it's hard from a mental health perspective to sit back and think about it. But
that's my challenge to you.
yeah, I think I'm just going to take your advice and just take time to reflect on that.
Awesome. All right, let's get into some questions. So Samantha asks, how do you think we could go about finding mentors? I think this is a really great question.
Yeah, so The majority of a lot of the technical mentors I've had was through my jobs and internships. One, and to be honest, I think I just want to recognize my privilege in a lot of this because my first internship was a software internship at Venmo. And my mentors at the time, one of them was the co-founder. And so I got super lucky to like have that time with him. And then one of them is now the CTO of Grailed, which is also this like massive streetwear marketplace. And a lot of my mentors at Pinterest, a lot of them have just been super wonderful, super approachable role models for myself. And I think it's definitely just that process of trying to build an authentic relationship, um, knowing knowing how to like be a good mentee, knowing how to like ask questions, how to like show your growth and appreciation. And then I think just when I think about like people I mentor, just like trying to like build that level of friendship, build that level of like trust and growth.
I love it. All right. So Trisha asks.
Oh, that's my co-founder. Hi, Trisha.
I saw several people in the chat that were just like, yeah, where's there, Kathy? Oh, the question disappeared. Oh, got a different one. We've been hearing a lot from our community on how hard it is to get junior roles right now, and I totally agree with that. Any advice in relation to startups for early career folks?
Yeah, so the two engineers on our team, Juliet and Dee, they were actually from non-traditional career paths. Queenly was their first full-time, I guess, full-time software engineering role. And so when I was doing the interview process, for background, Dee was a Lambda School apprentice, and Juliet did a lot of Berkeley extension, computer science, like quick classes. And what I looked for was that passion for the product. I think quite a few people have done things like submit their resume, and when it came time to myself or Trisha interviewing them, I asked them, "Oh, like, what do you think about our app so far? Can you give us thoughts?" And they say something like, "Oh, I didn't download the app yet," or "I haven't looked at Queenly yet." And I guess like what I really like is and this was also like when I was early on at as an engineer at Pinterest, and I think my main advantage to being hired there was because like I was really interested in consumer apps. I was really interested in like the product, and that was what I was like trying to like pitch myself to. That's basically what you have to do if you are similar to being a startup founder pitching to investors. When you're early in your career, you have to like really like pitch yourself, sell yourself, sell that not only like even if you're junior, you're still learning skills, that you're still improving, and that you have like a passion for the job that you're applying to.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. That's my addition. All right. Fatima asks, how did you come up with the idea of your startup? And whenever I think about doing my own thing, I get stuck at the idea level. See that being really hard.
Yeah, I think what's really great is, so my co-founder Trisha spoke at a recent Forbes conference. She gave this 5-minute speech on our founder story. I think it's the most succinct version of our founder story so far. So I recommend you Google that and try to watch it. But basically, both Trisha and I we're from lower income immigrant households. We never had money. We never had like that Cinderella moment. We had to struggle through paying for college, trying to make something of ourselves in America. And for my co-founder, she found a lot of support, a lot of career growth and scholarships through the pageant industry. So early on, like she did pageants, modeling, got really into like dresses, understanding that whole thing. And myself, I actually didn't get into it until after I started being an engineer at Pinterest. But basically, she convinced me to do a pageant, and that was like kind of the founder story of Queenly is that the CTO convinced, the CEO convinced the CTO to do a pageant for the sake of their tech startup. And outside of like doing that for like user research and really understanding the industry, it was really a great growth experience for learning about like how to be a better public speaker, how to improve my self-confidence, and our passion for wanting to change the whole formal wear fashion industry, of wanting it to be like, it should be a lot easier to buy a dress. It should be a lot, it should be more inclusive. It should show things like have a really good search engine, have things like skin tone filters, like body measurement filters and stuff like that. That was what we were passionate about. That was what Trisha convinced me to do. She convinced me to do a whole pageant, and she convinced me to start coding on this app in my spare time. In terms of like getting off the ground, it is such a struggle, and hopefully whatever I outline gives you a bit of clarity on just how messy it is, but it is fun. It is hard to, it's hard to say. Sometimes you just have to like take that jump. Did you build Queenly while still working at Pinterest? At what point did you feel it was okay to leave a stable job to pursue something promising but potentially risky? Yes, so Queenly was something I disclosed while I was still employed at Pinterest. I was basically just coding the iOS app nights and weekends. Trisha was doing the business equivalent of like getting users, customer support, doing partnerships and such. We quit both of our jobs. She was a recruiter at Uber, and we quit our jobs when we had a few thousand users and we had some revenue of the same scale, which is really tiny compared to where we're at now, but it was just that little bit of traction, and it was the fact that we did manage our risk, where we had a bunch of great early investors who came to us, basically like really nudged us to quit our jobs. And a few of them I mentioned in my last slides. But it was hard. It's hard to know. It's always going to be a risk. We did our best to manage risk.
Yeah, pitching to investors. How did you prepare for that as a CTO? It sounds daunting.
What's really great about not being a solo founder is being able to pitch as a team. And props to her, props to my co-founder, but she really took on the brunt of all the cold intros, initial pitches, all the initial rejections of it. So that's why I'm super grateful to her. Honestly, when you're a CTO with a really great co-founder, it's not as hard as you seem. It's much easier when you have that super solid co-founder to rely on. But when it comes to being able to pitch that technical side, really know your metrics, really being able to analyze and spit out the shape of like your month over month growth, the overall things like average order value, things like the size of your market, the lifetime value of a customer. You could probably Google a few of these. There's very common like metrics for marketplaces, for consumer apps to know, and being able to know metrics, as well as being able to like talk extensively about the core value of the tech you're building. When it's, for example, if it's involved in data science, if there's really key technical moats, if something's patentable, being able to really own that with confidence is really important to like selling the value of your startup.
Fantastic. And time just flew by. It's already 7:45, so we have to wrap everything up. Thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. It was a fantastic talk. I think we all learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. And as I mentioned, you're welcome to connect with me, send me an email, whatever, find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. And thank you everybody for joining. Be sure to check out all the other talks that are going on. Get on some networking, check out the sponsors, and we'll see you around. Thank you so much.